Today I'm going to explain a film called The Other Lamb. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. A woman in a white gown calmly sinks in water. In a secluded community, Selah and her sister Tamar watch a waterfall when Selah scares Tamar. The girls laugh and make their way through the mountains to a bunch of wooden cabins they call home. There are many women there who are both sisters and wives to a single male leader known as the shepherd. They all work together to do their daily chores like skin animals for clothes and meat. It's essentially a cult where one man has his way with all the women. At dinner, the daughters wear the blue dresses and eat on one side of the table, while the wives wear red are seated on the other side of the table. When the shepherd is done eating, he picks one of the wives to receive his blessing. The girl he chooses pants heavily as if she doesn't quite want to do what she's about to do. The daughters sleep away from the wives, and they all pray to the shepherd as if he's a god. The next day, the shepherd kisses the wife, and she thanks him for the night. Another wife shows up with a large belly. Selah looks at him from afar as if she's a little afraid of him. Later, the shepherd starts his sermon for the day. The wives came to him broken and he took them in. He says he has sacrificed his life for them by providing everything they needed. Selah seems to be daydreaming though as she sits there like a deer in headlights. Then, he grabs some goat's blood to mark the women's faces as they all praise him. Some cry in joy as the shepherd touched them. They looked possessed AF. In the afternoon, Selah and the shepherd walk together in the woods. The shepherd comments on how Selah looked uninterested during his sermon. Selah says she was indeed listening. The shepherd was only teasing her. Then he starts to flirt with her. Then calling her beautiful, he starts to twirl his fingers around Selah's hair as they inch closer. Selah asks him to tell her the story of how he met his mother. The shepherd ignores her as he leans for a kiss, but he leaves instead. Selah really wanted that kiss as she's left alone looking like she was longing for him. Back in the cabin, Eloise tells Selah and Tabitha how it felt to be with the shepherd last night. Eloise loved it and loved how the shepherd made her feel with his supportive words. Selah becomes quite jealous and starts to tease Eloise because Eloise is pretty much the same age as her. Yet she's already a wife. Tabitha tells Selah they are not allowed to speak to wives like that. Tabitha's mother comes in to separate the two sisters. She orders Selah to bring the leftovers to the hut. On her way there, Selah sees a decomposing bird. In the hut is where the rejected women live. These women are considered impure and have sinned against the shepherd's teachings. When Selah goes to the hut, she sees an unconscious woman who is fasting due to having her period. They consider bleeding as impure. Sarah walks out of the dark, revealing scars on her chest. Selah tells Sarah to eat the leftovers so that Sarah can be pure again. Selah thinks Sarah was sent to the hut because Sarah is being punished. Sarah tells her that her time will eventually come, and the shepherd will no longer find use in Selah once she starts getting her period. Selah demands Sarah not to touch her because she thinks Sarah is unclean. At night, Adriel, the pregnant wife, puts her daughter Lily to sleep. Lily wants to hear a story, but Adriel reminds her that only the shepherd can tell the stories. Late at night when everyone is asleep, Selah decides to watch the shepherd from the window. The shepherd stares at her back. Then Eloise looks out as well. Both of them watch Selah as the shepherd sticks his fingers into Eloise's mouth. The next day, the wives give the shepherd a bath. The older wives give Selah a bath by rubbing her clean. They instruct her on how to help a sheep give birth. It's an important rite of passage for her. She goes out to help the sheep give birth. However, she falls asleep. Once she wakes up, she finds the dying sheep with its newborn lamb. The newborn lamb looks like a super skinny skinned lamb. Selah is then interrupted when she realizes she got her period. She screams. Later that night, Selah is deeply frustrated with her blood as she tries to wipe her hands clean. Then she screams in frustration. At night, Tamar wonders what happened with the lamb. Selah tells her that a wild dog got the lamb. However, she sees a vision of herself stabbing the newborn lamb. When the shepherd found out, he forgave Selah. However, Selah thinks this all happened because she's impure. One morning, Selah stares at a ram while it pants at her heavily. The shepherd watches her do this. Later that evening, Selah hears a police officer telling the shepherd they have to leave the woods or else they'll be arrested. The shepherd then breaks the news to his flock about having to look for another Eden. The shepherd strangely falls back and all the women run to help him. Selah doesn't though. The shepherd is happy and says they'll find a new home. Then, the women happily carry him on their shoulders. Selah on the other hand is confused about everything. Alone in the woods, the shepherd tries to reassure Selah about the upcoming changes. He says Selah is the most pure because of how strong her faith is. The younger daughters look to her for strength. Before embarking on their adventure, the women sing farewell to their home. They all travel by foot with their flock of sheep with them. During their journey, they rest and Sarah can be seen eating on the sidelines away from the group. In the middle of the night, Selah gets visions of the shepherd slicing a lamb's throat. Then she's shown with a white dress stained by her period. During their trek, they find an abandoned house. The shepherd tells them they can't live there though because broken people created the house. After setting up camp, Selah stares at the shepherd making moves on Eloise again. Selah decides to go back to the abandoned house to look at a landscape painting. Suddenly, she's spooked to find Eloise behind her. Eloise smiles but it quickly fades when she reveals bruises on her neck. The next day, Selah is discovered to be impure by Tabitha. Her period is everywhere. Because of this, they make Selah walk in the back with Sarah. Later, they decide to take a break because of the strong winds. The older wives reminisce about how the shepherd used to look at them all lovingly, like how he looks at the daughters. A younger wife comments it's because they are old, so the old wife slaps her into next week. Meanwhile, Selah questions Sarah about Selah's mom. Sarah and Selah's mom had joined the cult together. They both fought for the shepherd's attention. Sarah tells Selah that her mom didn't die after childbirth. She had died due to an infection because the shepherd refused to seek medical help, leading to her death. The shepherd believed that the infection was used to test her faith. Later, Selah imagines herself inside a car that she sees while they are walking. She longs to be a regular teenager sitting in the car with Sarah driving and her mom in the passenger seat. That night, Selah slowly loves being with Sarah since they share the same sentiments towards the shepherd. Selah too has reservations about him, but she has been taught to obey. Sarah says she used to sneak out in the middle of the night and stand naked by the waterfall, which made her feel liberated. When Selah wonders why Sarah didn't just leave, she says it's because she doesn't know what's out there anymore and that she has nowhere to go. That night, noticing the closeness between Selah and Sarah, the shepherd uses Sarah's weakness of longing for him and spends the evening with her while everyone sleeps. He gags her with his fingers. The following day, Selah is allowed to walk with the rest again. The shepherd apologizes for leaving her with Sarah. During this, Adriel experiences contractions due to the strenuous hike. The daughters clutch to each other in fear as they listen to Adriel's screams of agony. The wives guide her during her labor, but still, she dies in childbirth. At the funeral, the shepherd forces Lily away from her dead mother. Sarah blames the shepherd for this and even addresses him by his given name, Michael. The shepherd coldly presides over the funeral and burns her body while the others sing a farewell song for her. Enraged, Selah has another vision of her furious self in front of the burning corpse of Adriel. The next day, Selah notices Sarah not following them. Sarah informs Selah that she is leaving with the baby. The shepherd had told them that the baby had to be left behind since it had been born incorrectly. The baby is a boy, and the shepherd wanted to leave him since a flock can only have one ram. Sarah reminds Selah to keep being strong and helps her sisters before leaving with the baby. As they walk further, Tamar becomes impatient and questions shepherd if they are near their new home. The shepherd doesn't answer, but Tamar feels they are heading in the wrong direction, which enrages the shepherd, so he hits Tamar. After hitting her head multiple times, he drags her and asks Tamar to lead their way instead. The women can't do anything about it as they are afraid to get hit as well. Selah watches the scene with a furious gaze. A little while later, the shepherd declares a valley with a beautiful lake to be their new Eden. The voyage has shaken the sisters' faith, but the shepherd baptizes everyone, which appears to be an act of cleansing and demonstrating his control over them. The first young woman tells them that she feels different again, but when it's Selah's turn, he keeps her underwater longer than others. While underwater, Selah envisions herself drowning in crimson water. She is reminded of all her anger before the shepherd pulls her up again. That evening, the old wives don't eat because they are fasting. They look sad as she says tomorrow they will be reborn. Later, the shepherd summons Selah to his tent, but Tamar tells her not to go. They've all grown to loathe the shepherd for abandoning his pregnant wife. But Selah continues because she knows she must obey. Inside the tent, the shepherd commands her to unbraid herself and compliments her beauty for looking like her mother. He takes control of her and puts 2 fingers in her mouth so she can't scream. When he's done, Selah remains still, gazing up and trying to figure out what she's doing here. Her strange visions start to show again as her anger flares. She daydreams about the sisters murdering the shepherd by eating him, then smashing a rock in his face. That night, Sela disobeys his rules by telling a story that she learned from Sarah, as if she's trying to awaken their mind that they deserve so much better. Sela tells them the story of a naked woman in front of the waterfalls, which shows her where to go and be free. The next day, the daughters wake up to discover the wives are missing. They arrive at the lake and find the shepherd kneeling among the wives' red robes. The shepherd concocts a lie about how the river carried them away and has given the wives eternal life. The young girls mourn the loss of their mothers as they run to the robes. The shepherd tells the daughters that they have to replace the role of the wives. He asks Sela to marry him and promises her all of his grace. However, the angered Sela refuses his grace and says he is not their shepherd. The shepherd is shocked as he gets rejected, so he slaps Sela. As Sela imagines what the shepherd has done to the wives, she hits back hotter. Much later, police arrive at the location where the old wives' remains had washed away. They follow the path and encounter the shepherd, who is dead. He wears ram's horns on his head, just like a demon disguised as a shepherd. Meanwhile, the daughters stand in front of a waterfall, just like in Sarah's story. Sela stands before them while holding a lamb in her arms. What a very powerful film that makes clear statements about patriarchal indoctrination and abuse. The images will haunt me for a while.